Okay, so I thought we would start with a few questions, everyone, all around kind of just pressure generally and how pressure might be feeling for us right now. So the first one I want to talk to you about was for you in your work at the moment. If you like, let me know in chat. What direction does pressure come to you from? So is it people, don't name the person, if it's a person, don't name them, but is just pressure come to you from people? Is it particular projects? Is it sort of deadlines? Like what is the direction for the pressure that affects you at the moment? Again, head into chat, let me know. Got deadlines. Oh, okay, so for more senior people, Olabode says, that's interesting, Katie. Myself, let's capture some of these things. So we've got pressure comes from me, pressure comes from people who are more senior, but pressure comes from deadlines. What else have we got? Ambiguity. Oh, interesting, Tom. So kind of like the unknown. Oh, conflicting priorities. Yeah, like P times P times P times P. Good luck. Targets of the hierarchy. Needing to making the right decision. Oh, that's interesting, Julia. You know, like that kind of pressure to get it right. Like this has to be the right decision. I hear that a lot actually with like career development things, you know, and people are like, I want to make sure this is the right move for me to take. Like they put so much pressure on the next thing I do, it's got to be the right move, even though the next thing is probably not going to be the last thing we do. Like we kind of self-create pressure, like Katie was saying. It's interesting. Sandra says, I recently went part-time and I feel the pressure to keep everything I do up to date. So it's almost like you've changed the structure of your working week, but you haven't changed like the expectations of what you can do, maybe, Sandra. Like there's like a conflict there with what you can achieve in the way you're working now. Fear, that's interesting, Hannah. Fear of making mistakes, of getting it wrong. Pressure for people reporting to you. Okay, I mean, there's a lot of pressure coming at us, everybody. This is my takeaway from that. We've got lots coming at us, and I guess the point is that probably that's not going to go away, right? Like we're going to work for senior people that have like high expectations. We're going to place that expectation on ourselves. Deadlines are going to keep coming. Ambiguity is not going anywhere. Like this stuff is kind of part of how work is now, and how we do our work. I also thought, you know, it's really easy to think about, all these things that put pressure onto us. When do you think you create pressure for other people? Which I think is a bit of a difficult question, but I think like it's easy, isn't it, for us to go, you know, Sarah creates pressure for me. But when do you think you create pressure for other people? Oh, Jude, when you're not clear. So when you're looking for clarity, okay, so you're looking for clarity, you put pressure on people, to give you the answer. What high expectations of other people? Yeah, I think I put pressure on people when I expect them to work in a way that works for me. So for example, I'm an early morning person, and I think I'm like, I'll have been working, like this morning I got up at 5:30, I'll have been working for a while, and it gets to like 7 o'clock and I'm like, why hasn't Sarah responded? Like I literally a text this morning I was like, read this Harvard Business Review article, and I've read this chapter of the new book, and I was like, where is she? It's 7 o'clock. Where is she? You know, when you can see on WhatsApp that someone last looked at their phone at like, I think Sarah was like 11 minutes past 12, and I'm like, I mean, you should definitely be checking my messages by now. So I think that I definitely have that, like, if someone doesn't work in the same way as me, that probably, I think I probably create pressure for people. What else have we got here? When you're rushing for a deadline, Caroline, okay. So it's almost like, I see this a lot, you know, when you're urgent, you try to make your urgent someone else's important. You're like, I need to get this done now. And it's sort of like you sort of push that onto other people. Yeah, Emily, there's creating work at the same speed as me. Like the way that I work should be the way that we all work. Is that sort of like, I guess it's like a ways of working expectation. Anything else here? Asking people to do things outside their comfort zone. Are you less productive in the afternoon, Helen? Don't know, you have to ask Sarah. Maybe. I think the quality of my contribution might go down because I get more distracted by the stuff. You know, like in the morning, I'm less in my inbox. I'm more like, I want to get this thing done. Whereas by like 2 o'clock, I feel like the day has got in the way, you know, like the Teams messages so I don't know. You have to ask Sarah. I always wonder about people in the 5 a.m. club. Sarah hates me. Okay, one more question for you. How does your pressure affect your performance? So all this pressure that we are creating for other people, honestly, it's worth being aware of that, and that we are taking in for ourselves. How do you think it how do you think it affects you? Because if it doesn't affect you, like, what's the problem? Okay, so we've got mistakes, tunnel vision, erratic ways of working, frustration, poorer quality of work, disappointed in my performance. It's quite emotive, these words, isn't it? You know, like I'm erratic, it's lose confidence, irritability. It's quite an emotional response to how we feel when we're working under pressure. Short, abrupted, grumpy. Okay. So I find it quite interesting when I was reading some of the research. There's a really good article, which is linked in the pod sheet if you've not seen it. There's a good article that Thomas Chamorro from Music wrote around pressure in Harvard Business Review. And it was almost like this tipping point. So there is a level of pressure which actually can have quite a positive impact on our performance, because it you know, like it moves you forward, it galvanizes you, it kind of creates pace to keep working, and then there's this tipping point when basically either too much pressure or an inability to effectively like perform with that level of pressure means that we get all the stuff that you're talking about here. Oh, thanks, Lucy. Lucy's a star. She's put the link in there in the chat for you. So I think everyone's tipping point is different. That's one thing I do want to say. I think that where we all sit and our level of skill that we start with this, I think it's kind of different, and that's okay. That's okay. Like, some people might already be better at performing with pressure. Some of us might have more that we need to learn to get there. But I think it's worth working out what your tipping point is. So if you like almost look at a week and kind of go, oh, well, that was pressure, but I dealt okay with that, and that was pressure and I didn't do okay, so what was different? I think it's sort of useful to work out what's your personal tipping point for pressure, because like I say, I think it is different for all of us. I would say you'll find your tipping point when these feelings are creeping in. You know, when you're like saying, oh, irritability, I'm snapping, it's become draining, all these emotions, I think they are your signals of where the pressure tipping point has kicked into effect for you, and you are less effective because of it. And what we are trying to do, what we're trying to do in the podcast is, Sarah and I don't really like this idea of just cope with pressure. You know, all those stuff that you said at the start, like all the pressure, where it's coming from. The idea that you should almost just accept it, just get on with it, just kind of go through that pressure point, just accept it all. It doesn't, to us, that doesn't really feel that empowering. It doesn't feel like it feels like you're sort of passive with pressure. You know, like it's just going to keep coming and you've just got to keep coping. But I think that leads to unhappiness and burnout and like lots of the sort of things that you've said here. I think we make more mistakes. And so what we are trying to do is move away from this idea of sort of passively accepting pressure and just kind of just coping with it all, to much more working out, well, how do we perform under pressure? And when we're performing under pressure, it's much more like we're able to adapt. So we're kind of trying to go from, I've just got to accept this is happening and do what I've always done and just get through this moment because that's the job to do. It's not that's quite passive. What we're saying is, actually, I'm going to be really proactive about this. I'm going to work out how I perform best under pressure, and I'm going to adapt my approach in order to do it. So that's very much like the positioning of the podcast that we talked about. I'm just going to check up on messages. So what we did on the podcast and how we structured this was we were sort of working out different types of pressure, and Sarah, not me, came up with the matrix. And on the matrix, there were sort of two sort of dimensions to the matrix of how we perform under pressure. And it depends, first of all, on whether you can see the pressure coming. So is it anticipated pressure? So I know, for example, that's going to be like a pretty difficult week because I've got so much to do. I can see it in the diary. Or I know that's going to be a really big meeting because it's the one that, you know, we do every year or whatever. Like, you can see it coming, or you did not see it coming. Like it just like, you're like, whoa, where did that come from? So the level of anticipation of pressure is sort of one dimension. And the second is how much control over it. So high control is almost like you can really directly influence that situation. Like maybe it's your meeting, it's your moment, you've got a high degree of control over it. Or this feels like something that you don't have the ability to influence, maybe because you've not got the skill, maybe because it doesn't feel like it's your place to do, you know, to take control in that moment. But where you sit on these dimensions makes a kind of a really big difference to how you might perform under pressure, how you might proactively respond to those situations. So I thought what we'd do is, before we go into the ideas for action, like for each of these quadrants, like what to do, I thought we might just as a group just think about, what pressure would sit for each of us in these quadrants. So for example, if I explain what I mean, this one over here, this is the anticipated pressure that you've got high control of. I think this one is, for me, it's either a presentation, if it's like a big presentation. So I'm on stage, 300 people, like Sarah and I often do. So last week, for example, we were presenting to about 300 people at the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals in Wales. And that was anticipated pressure. That was a lot of people in the audience. It was a massive event, but I had quite a high degree of control over it. That we knew that was coming. We knew what we were delivering. We got there early. So I personally put in here, presentations fit for me in this one. I was also thinking another thing that fits for me in here is we're currently writing, on the way with writing book 3, which is all very exciting. But again, that fits for me in that book because that is high pressure, but I know the deadlines. It's us who are writing it, right? So that's what fits for me in that box. What would, in terms of the work that you're doing at the moment and the type of pressure, what feels like something that you can anticipate that you have control over? So it's a high pressure moment for you, but it's coming, and actually you do kind of own quite a lot of that. Board meetings, Caroline, committee meetings, job interviews. Yeah, I was trying to think about job interviews, Steve, whether you have high control over them or not. I had that in my mind. I was like, you can prepare for it, right? You can prepare for it. You can probably research the people. Probably quite a lot that you can do to take control of it. First big mailing going out this week. Good luck, Claire. Chairing a meeting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, interesting, Caroline. I think I'd gone there. We could probably debate where it goes. Okay, so again, it's important. I'm going to ask you which one of these quadrants you spend more time in. So I just kind of want you to be like, oh, what does this look like for me, to make that question easier to answer in a moment. So let's go down here. This box down here is where you've got high control. So like maybe it's your meeting or it's your moment, like it's your board meeting, it's your interview, whatever it is. But you have got unanticipated pressure. So you did not see this one coming. You're like, whoa. I have like a, what do I call them? I can't think of a polite word to say. So I'm just going to put, I'm going to put tricky people. That's what I'm going to call them. That's the politest thing I could say. But when you're in a meeting and you have people that just seem to want to derail the discussion. So it's like my meeting or it's my presentation. It could be something like this. Like I've got high control over PodPlus, but then what might happen is somebody might like openly disagree with something I'm saying. And suddenly it's quite distracting and it causes quite a lot of pressure, and I'm trying to help everyone else to learn, but I've got this person who's being very difficult. So I often find for me that's the kind of pressure that I feel in that box. It typically comes from people. What about you? What would look like that in your work? Might be deadlines, someone like cutting a deadline or a budget. Well, I have high control, KD, because it's my meeting. So this is my thing. I did not expect that to happen in that thing. Last minute request, revised timelines, ad hoc urgent requests. Yeah, in your area of expertise. Yeah. Change of ideas and airs from a client. Yeah. What else have we got? Last minute requests. I'm just going through this. Else have we got? Disruptive individuals. Yeah. Challenging, Angela, committee members asking questions or challenging elements of the report I'm presenting. Okay, so we've potentially got some of that stuff going on. This one down here, so this is where you feel like you've got low control. So like you're not very experienced in this area. You've not done this kind of thing before. You haven't got a plan for how you respond to this, and you didn't see it coming. So this one I think feels like where you're probably in the moment you feel the most out of control, and I feel like the pressure here comes from you're like, I didn't see this coming and now I don't know what to do. It's like that kind of that. I think this is almost like panic pressure. This one is what this one feels like. I would say the thing that I feel here the most is tech. Like, so I have this frequently because of the job that we do. We are, we're delivering sessions all the time, and tech does not work perfectly. And I often can't see that coming. It's just one day Teams doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, great, I've got 300 people who want me to talk about career development, and I cannot get my tech working. And I can't fit. It feels really hard. What else do you? IT challenges, loss of internet. Anyone got anything in the tech? I mean, tech's a big one for me. When unexpected people get added to a meeting invite by others. Ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, do lots of you have that? Like, I didn't know you were going to come into this meeting. Oh, that's an interesting one. Unexpected news and information. Illness. I hadn't thought about that one, Zoe. Yeah, low control. You got COVID and it's created like pressure you didn't know. That's a really interesting one. Probably very relevant right now. Yeah. Treatment. Yes. Really good point. Like, because really your family emergencies. Okay, this is way big. I just go with tech. But yeah, illness, emergencies, transport changes. Yeah, we can't fix the strikes, right? Like it's a difficulty. Really interesting. Okay, and then this top one up here, where do you get to on this one? So this is like you can see that it's coming. You can see this pressure is like, on its way, but you feel like you can't do a lot about it. So this one I kind of have like, I put workload in here. Like I feel like sometimes I look, the pressure that I feel is like, I know that this is going to be a lot. Like I can see that week's going to be particularly busy and I don't feel like I can do a lot about it. Like I can't, those are commitments that are made. There's commitments that I have made and I can't, like, I look at it and go, that's just pressure. That I think this is probably the one that I fall most into, like the coping mindset rather than the performing mindset. I'm like, I've just got to cope with it. I can see it. I can't do anything about it. I just got to cope with it. So probably for me, this is where I potentially get a bit passive. What have you got here? Is the workload quadrant about overload versus overwhelm? What podcast? I think Sarah did a podcast with Dr. Bill Mitchell on resilience, and he talked about like the difference, like your resilience depends on whether it's overload or overwhelm. Like it's okay to sort of be overloaded because you can manage it. It's when you're overwhelmed that you like lose your control. So that's not an easy answer to the question, Steve, but potentially. End of financial year, anticipated pressure, low control. Yeah, so you can totally see that coming. Yeah, I get that. Organizational restructuring, absenteeism. Yeah, so this is, for me, this is the one where I think I could be most passive in that box and therefore less able to effectively perform. Let's do stars on screen, and for new people I'll explain how you do it. Where do you think you feel the most pressure today? In which of those quadrants, in terms of the work that you do, can you stick a star on my screen with, like, if you're like, I think most of my pressure's in that sort of like that overwhelmed, it's anticipated but I don't have control, or I think it is, I can see it coming and I have high control but it still feels difficult to do. Can you put a star on the screen on which of these quadrants you feel like is the pressure that you feel the most at work? For people that are new, Lucy's just put how to do this in the chat. If you go towards the top of your screen, you'll see view options, and then click on that, and then you should see annotate, and then you do stamp, and then you do star. Or you can put a donut-shaped circle on the screen. That's all good too. I'm fine with donuts. Elizabeth, I will add you a star. If anyone can't get that functionality working and you want to contribute, I can add you a manual star. No problem, Elizabeth. Okay, so it looks like the workload one looks like the one that we're feeling the most as a group. Interesting. Always just insightful to see. And again, I always think, if we're feeling like that, that's probably how our colleagues are feeling too. Like we're a good sample, I think. So when you're thinking, if you're a manager or a mentor, the pressure that the people that work with you and for you are probably feeling the most is that top left one. They can see it, but they don't feel very in control of it. So potentially you could help them with some of the ideas for action we're going to talk about now. What's this? Could workload be high control if we learn how to focus? I might have to think about that, Claudia. Right, I'm going to delete your lovely stars. One's crept in, and we're going to go through some ideas for action. So for each of those quadrants, what could you do differently if that's where you're spending, like you're feeling that you're under pressure in that moment? So the one that was here, so remember, this is kind of like we talked about, sort of presentations going on here and board meetings and chairing things. This is where we recommend you do high pressure practice. And I think I saw Steve earlier saying about interviews. I have to scroll up a little bit, Steve, but I think I saw that you'd, with a coach, you had done preparation for an interview with a coach before the moment. That's exactly what we mean. So you want to look in your diary, spot those high pressure moments and do some high pressure practice. Because basically, if you can feel like you're preempting and you're confident, what we're trying to get here is confidence. Like and you'll get confidence by sort of preparing and practicing for it. So it could be an interview, it could be a presentation, it could be like the board meeting. And the board meeting, you might even want to like go into the room that the board meeting is going to be in if it's in person. Like, you know, just take the variables away that could effectively impact your sense of control. Like, you can see it coming. The worst thing can happen here is you lose control of the situation. High pressure practice means that you kind of stay in that box where you've got like a high degree of control. So spot that moment, like, what pressure am I anticipating? And then think about how can you do some high pressure practice. Oh, that's interesting, Julia. Anyone else got any tips like Julia's? I often record a video of my presentations before giving them live. It really helps me feel prepared. That's a nice thing to do. Anyone else do anything for their high pressure practice for interviews or presentations? Anything that helps them? We sometimes send feedback. So like, if I think about our TED talk, I can't remember if we said this on the podcast or not, but when we did our TED talk, we recorded it on Zoom first and we sent it to a couple of people. And the reason that felt like was practice, because we were doing the talk and we did it to time, but I think getting feedback from people added the pressure in, because we could have just looked at it ourselves, but you know that you're exposing it to other people, like a coach, or getting some feedback from the people, that adds a bit of pressure in, and I think if you can kind of get used to that pressure, it becomes easier for you to manage it. PowerPoint has a coach option. I did not know that, to practice presentations. Interesting. I was also doing a team session with Microsoft last week on Teams, and they had something called Copilot. Any of you use that? It was really clever, like summarized everything that I was saying. It's like, that's a lot clearer than me. I think it made me sound a lot smarter. I was like, great, bring Copilot along. So that's high pressure practice. This bottom one down here. So this one was where we were like potentially feeling derailed by a difficult person. This is where Katie said about the 3 A's earlier. I learned this technique. This sounds really ego-y and I don't mean it to, but I learned this technique from Richard Branson. When I was at Virgin, I think I mentioned this before, we were having like a session at head office and Richard was there, and somebody asked Richard a deliberately difficult question. I think it was about some international political situation at the time, from memory. Like, it was a difficult one. It was like, what's your perspective on ... And what he did was like, he said, oh, interesting question, which is the acknowledge part of here. Like, so you acknowledge someone's question or point or perspective, whatever it is, interesting question. And then he asked back to them, what's your perspective on that? Like, so he took almost like that person was trying to put pressure on him. And all he did was very subtly, but directly, gave it back to the person. And then it gave him space to listen to what the person was like, well, I think this and this and this. And then because you've then got a bit more information, you can sort of adapt your approach. So you've got more time to think the question through. You're not having to respond instantly. You can kind of use what they've said to sort of adapt how you respond. And you can ask the individual. So I could be like, oh, that's a really interesting question. What do you think? So I could ask you directly, or I could ask other people that I'm with. So let's say it happened on PodPlus. Somebody here asked me a really hard question and I could get quite derailed by it. What I could do is acknowledge it and say, I actually haven't had that question before. What do we think as a group? See, so instead of me feeling the pressure directly, I kind of share that with other people, and it just creates space. The issue with this one is because you've got high control, you respond too quickly in the moment, before you've really thought that stuff through. Okay, I've got 2 more to go and 2 minutes to do it. So I'll move on to this one. This tech one here, which wasn't just tech actually, is it'd be interesting to see how you think this works with some of the other examples. So Sarah and I had called this one like fix it fast. So this is where you didn't see it coming and you've got an anticipated pressure. By fixing it fast, we don't necessarily mean make the train go or get rid of the illness. It's almost like fix and follow it fast. I'll give you an example. I was doing a presentation of the week. It went wrong in the moment. It was not good. As soon as the presentation had finished and I sort of apologized for the issue, I got on a call with the team and I was like, how do we fix it fast? So in the moment, I actually couldn't fix the tech. The tech screwed up, right? It screwed up. I couldn't do it. I did best I could in the moment. But what I did do was almost like fix my response. I was like, right, we need to, like, super quickly, because some situations do go wrong, right? And it does create pressure, but what matters is how you respond to it. So it's not, like I say, it's not fixing the train, it's not fixing the tech, it's how do you sort of fix the impact of that thing. And so that might be, you know, a very quick apology, or offering someone a different date for a meeting, or saying, well, what if I sent you the information over email instead, or I did a quick video message for you that you could share with the team, like whatever it is, but think of a quick fix it fast solution to a situation where you might have felt like you lost control. And the last one is up here. So this is where we can see the stuff coming. This is one where most people are in. So where you see the stuff coming, but you don't feel like you've got loads of control over the situation. What we were saying, what we think here is moments that matter. So look at your diary. You probably, in that situation where you're really overwhelmed, it can sometimes feel like you're not doing anything particularly well, you know, when you're under that level of pressure. So pick the moments that matter the most and prioritize them. So I don't go, I'm under loads of pressure, I've got loads to do, I'm going to make everything 10 out of 10. I go, let's be realistic, pick one thing a day that you want to do well and really, really focus on that thing. And then what that helps you to do is it gives you a greater sense of control. Because if you try to do everything, that's going to be a bit difficult to do, but you can see it coming. And if you pick a moment a day or a moment a week that matters the most for you, it will give you a greater sense of control about how you respond to it. Okay. So the summary of this, so this visual here is on the pod sheet. So if you want to, because if you want something to support the episode and you're like, oh, I could do, that's quite a useful summary for me, the pod sheet, which you can get on amazingif.com, or someone from the team might stick the link in a minute, has got this and it's got some reflection questions for you as well. But I hope that has been helpful. Thank you for all of your sharing and all of your reflecting. Lucy's getting lots of love. Lucy's always good on the links, everybody. But yeah, if you want the link to that pod sheet, just go to amazingif.com on the podcast page and you'll be able to find it there. Have a good day, everybody, and a good rest of your week, and we will be back with you very soon for some more PodPlusing.